Hi, everybody. Welcome back to On the Pulse. Today, I am joined by my colleague, Farhan Mirza. Farhan, welcome.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you with us. Farhan, you have spent 20 years in multiple different facets of the healthcare industry, working in complex healthcare systems with payers, providers, regulators, as well as pharmaceutical agents. Between here, the Middle East, all different countries in the Middle East, as well as back in the UK. That's a pretty long and illustrious career, and it's very very good to have you here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saeeda, for having me today. It's a pleasure to spend the time talking to you, and hopefully we'll be able to have a good conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, what has life with COVID been like for you, Farhan?
Well, thankfully, I've been fortunate not to actually contract the disease, but certainly a lot of people around me and the whole environment having changed. It's been challenging, as it has for many people. I think you learn to adapt to a different way of working, a different way of living, and it's surprising how adaptable one can become. Though that in itself does present challenges, certainly in those working around you, those having to cope with you being at home as a consultant, used to traveling and living out of a suitcase, and then suddenly being at home a lot more. That creates a different dynamic. My wife was very keen for me to get back out on the road as soon as possible. But on a personal level, I'd say that with half my family in the UK and the other half here, you do feel very isolated and torn. And when you're in a lockdown, you feel that's very imposed upon you. And I'm sure with many others, going through that traumatic period was very painful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, especially you have slightly older kids that are in university in different halfway across the world. What has that been like?
I think you start to, thankfully, at that age, they are more self-contained, more independent, and can use technology more fluently. So you have the ability to at least converse. But they are still young adults, and as any parent knows, you do worry and you are concerned because you are not as accessible to them if needed, and you rely on so much. But ultimately, the physical connection is what's crucial, and in the absence of that, you feel very exposed, very vulnerable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you raise a very, very good point. One of the things that we keep hearing and talking about is how COVID is really and truly having an impact on a lot of the mental well-being, the emotional well-being of a lot of people around us, right? And it's especially now, it's a tough time. We've all gone through this together. It's been many months. We've gone through the ups, we've gone through the downs, and it looks like we are getting ready to hunker down for yet another let's say, slightly challenging period ahead. And a lot of people are just concerned about the impact this might have on some of their employees, some of their friends, in terms of feeling a bit isolated, frustrated, anxious with everything that's going on. So I wonder if this is something that you have seen a lot of, given you focus a lot on healthcare and well-being is a very large part of that.
Yeah, and it does strike people in different ways. I think in the first round, there was still a novelty factor. People still felt this is a fad. The first week or two, there was like a sense of, well, this is a holiday break. But the reality kicks in, the separation kicks in, the isolation kicks in. And now, having had a nice summer of freedom and getting back into routines, to see the lockdowns coming back in again, there's a sense of dread. There's a real apprehension. People are genuinely scared because 4 weeks, 6 weeks previously was not something people want to relive. And so going into this again is leading to a lot of anxiety. And I think some people now are more comfortable talking about a topic that was previously had a stigma attached, maybe it was a taboo topic. I think people are more open and receptive to talking about mental health topics. And certainly in this region, you're starting to see a lot more interest in provision of care to support people who are going through, depression takes many forms. There's a broad gamut of things that come under the umbrella of mental health. And it can be from panic attacks and anxiety swings to just behavioral change. And certainly I've seen that in a few friends and also in a few clients who I have very close interactions with, where the effect has been longer lasting. And so my concern, I'm sort of sure the concern of many is of those who are very vulnerable, haven't fully recovered from the last bout, entering into this new lockdown in the darker, colder winter months in particular, will leave them, and what support mechanisms are available to them.
Yeah. And look, I think that's a very interesting point, right? Because a lot of large organizations that we interact with are trying to be proactive about this. They're trying to put in some kind of employee wellness systems in place that may or may not have existed before, to try and make sure that they, as much as possible, stay on the front foot, and they try to catch some of these problems or issues that may come up beforehand. But these tend to be relatively, if I put it on the spectrum, relatively milder than in terms of support that is provided. So I'm curious what you're seeing in, let's say, perhaps the more clinical end of the spectrum, or possibly even, on the other end, in terms of the kind of support that is being provided, the kind of support that is being requested, and frankly, if this is creating a bit of a let's say, demand in what we see.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Dr. Saeeda. One reality is that this is not a fad, it's not a novelty, it's not going away. And as we see this is resurfacing, there will be other pandemics and other health outbreaks that equally require a change in the way things are done. And most of that is through HR, in the way that HR policies are having to advance and become much more sophisticated and personalized to the well-being and the welfare of people in the organization. So as an employer, the response has to be more than just the simplistic measures that seem to be sufficient in the past. But now the realization is people do get lonely. People working on their own in a one-bed apartment are isolated, and they need the connection. So whatever virtual or other form of connectivity you can provide people, we're social animals by nature. We need the interactions. And so organizations are starting to respond to that and finding quite creative means, whether it's work dinners done virtually or social events done over the web, means by which people feel connected to someone and something else bigger than them and beyond the four walls that confine them. So that's some of the things we're starting to see. I think on an individual, as I took a poll through some of my contacts to say, how are you dealing with what went through, and how are you preparing yourself for what's imminent, for the second wave that was impending? People, what we looked at was the simple things around meditation, prayer, reflection, things that help us centered and with a sense of balance. And equally, we had to find ways to escape, because those channels and entertainment and whatever means we had previously were limited. So what we could do through music and reading and stories to take us out of this place and take us on a journey and expose us to new ideas. And that links back into learning and growth. And, those who succeeded have been able to use this as an opportunity to advance themselves and learn new skills and broaden their networks, rather than feel constrained and captivated by what they have, which then becomes a limitation. So I think there are some best practices, if you want to say, that are emerging, because at least now we know what to expect. And we're going into this with our eyes open and with some level of battle scars and some experience that we can build upon.
Right. No, and that makes perfect sense, right? And this is not something that's here today, gone tomorrow. This is probably something that we will have to deal with, possibly on and off, for a bit. So I think you're absolutely right. The more comfortable we can make ourselves, and frankly, find whatever peace or whatever elements of satisfaction and just happiness wherever we can, absolutely go a long way. And we're lucky. We're in a place where the weather is fantastic right now, and we can always sit outside, go eat, drink, grab a coffee, meet some friends. We're still able to do that. So in so many ways, we are absolutely blessed that we have some of those options that may not necessarily be available everywhere at this point. But you're absolutely, absolutely. And given this is something that is, let's say, a longer term thing, it's not going away anytime soon. This is probably having significant implications on the different facets of healthcare, I presume.
Yes, that's right. So the way in which care has been traditionally delivered, that conventional model's been under a great deal of pressure for quite some time. The burden on the state, the burden on payers, the burden on the patient, waiting times have not really been satisfactory. So there's been a seismic shift already for some time, and in this region too, of just adapting and evolving the way models of care are set up. And what COVID has done is it's fast-tracked a lot of those key elements. And new models of care are becoming much more established as the norm through trial, through experimentation, but rapid adoption. And that is what's making the outlook for this far more sustainable. Because whenever the patients are driving and embracing the change, that's when we know things stick and things last. Because ultimately, they are the deciders on how they want to be diagnosed and the therapies that they want to go through and the changes and the treatments they want and the outcomes they demand. So when they embrace these sorts of changes, that's when things really start to take off. And, you know, the hospitals were under a lot of pressure previously. What COVID did was it drove a lot of additional pressure on the acute care side, on the chronic care, the intensive care, at the expense of ambulatory, long-term, where patients had to then be put on a longer waiting list and delay very important treatments. Consequently, the way around that was to start looking at alternative means to engage them, to deliver their treatments, whether it's through telemedicine, whether it's relying on the third sector to participate in the care delivery, and also self-care, arming and educating the patients to take better care of themselves. Because on another point, patient adherence is one of the reasons why clinical outcomes are not where they need to be, because patients haven't really understood or followed through on their treatment regimen. So seeing all this take place and you know, recruiting and enlisting pharmacies to be the new front line, where most patients can go to instead of straight into wanting an x-ray because they have a cough, they can actually go see the pharmacist and get some simple over-the-counter treatments, which may be sufficient for their needs. So we have seen these model cares take effect and really become more established. And I think the outlook is very positive, that this is the future.
Look, that makes a lot of sense. And you talked about the impact that this has on the model of care and the interactions with the patients. I wonder if you also see a bit of an impact on the supply chain, on the let's say, the operational side of things as well.
Yes, indeed. Now that has borne the brunt of a lot of the pressure on the health system. The demand for certain medications really placed a strain. We had one client earlier this year who had, for some reason, not purchased sufficient PPE, protective personal equipment, face masks in this case. And that shortage meant that they had to rush order at surge-priced provision from China on emergency air transport into the country. And they paid some horrendous amount because they hadn't planned, they didn't have sufficient safety stock. And really, those bad practices, you know, exposed them. And you never want to be stock out on delivering critical, urgent patient care. One response to that is, well, let's just build lots of big buffers, let's fill the warehouses, let's assume that the worst case scenario is going to be the norm, and just stock to the roof. Unfortunately, it comes with a huge working capital risk. And what we do know is, with a lot of these providers under pressure on the top line, because we're seeing DRGs coming in, we're seeing payers really pushing back on a lot of the claims. So there's top line pressure on a lot of the providers. Couple that with working capital increases, and you can start to see that there's going to be a real liquidity crunch. And providers are going to be struggling for cash. And so they need to do something smarter and less simplistic than just buying lots of everything. And that's, you know, one client said, well, look, I survived the storm. I weathered the storm. My inefficiencies actually saved lives. However, that's not the sustainable model that's going to see providers through. And I think now what we're seeing is a realization that they need to be smarter with the way they plan, smarter with the way they forecast. And so I was in a meeting today with my clients, and they are now getting daily consumption information from their downstream and from their upstream. And with that better visibility, they can plan without the bullwhip, without the noise. They get a true demand signal, which allows for much better planning, much more accurate planning. And with that, they can be optimizing their working capital, their supplies, buying only what they need with a lot more confidence, and not buying just in case, but certainly buying just enough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, again, this is, it's a time of uncertainty, right? It's a time of, you don't necessarily know what tomorrow will look like, and it may or may not be what you expect it to be. So I think what we're seeing is in times like this, it is essential to have a lot of data, a lot of information, just a very detailed understanding of trends and of understanding, as you said, consumption, of understanding all the different indicators so that you can keep a very close eye on these, almost, different command centers, patient dashboards, and to basically really and truly understand what is happening and to try and stay ahead of the trends as much as possible, as opposed to anything else. These are absolutely some of the larger scale transformations that we're seeing. I assume we're seeing these across the spectrum in, again, hospitals, in pharmaceuticals, across the chain, really.
Yeah, that's right. Now, the control towers, the logistics control towers, the control centers, as you say, are all trying to build a comprehensive, holistic view of supply chains, of stock, of strategic supplies, to really try and minimize. And only by collaborating and having those partnerships with your third-party logistics companies, with your group procurement organizations, and with other providers too, who are in this together with you, having that visibility allows you to co-opt and share information and better manage what you have as a shared resource. Technology is really helping, and technology is really the backbone towards this information exchange, disparate data sources, data standards. It's all coming in a very automated way now. And so you're going to start to see machine-to-machine integration, minimizing the need for human intervention. So these are the advancements that are moving forward. But critical to their success is the policy and the people and the capabilities, and building a culture of trust and sharing, relying on information to make fact-based decisions, and ensuring you have processes that are end-to-end and not limited to the boundaries of your organization, or worse, to the functional department. So these are big changes that still need to come through. And, technology often leads the process and the people change. But I think now there's a certain case to make that change happen faster.
So then if we think about it, really, we've gone through the part where we didn't really know what was going on, and it was very much a reactionary day-to-day mode, to the point where we stabilized it and we tried and we caught up on a lot of, let's say, pent-up demand, in terms of what is available. If we look forward, what do you think over the next 12 months are some of the key things that a lot of the providers need to keep in mind? And what is it that they really and truly need to focus on to be as successful as they can be in these days?
What we've seen is that they've been able to marshal capacity, they've been able to repurpose resources on the fly where needed, and they've been very effective. I think in this region in particular, the health systems have done remarkably well with the right leadership, the right government policies, and the track and trace, the level of testing, the quality of the labs, the turnaround speed. These are all positives. And I think moving forward over the next 12 months, providers have got to be willing to, firstly, needing to manage the top line. Patient volumes are changing, the case mix is changing, the reimbursement profiles are changing. Equally, they need to be far more attentive to their costs, because different case mix and different revenues place different organizational strain, and you need to be able to manage your OPEX, and we've talked about working capital already. So managing cash at a very difficult time is going to be crucial. And the next 12 months, the unpredictability looking forward, the prognosis is uncertain. And for that, you need to have healthy cash balances to weather whatever storms you're going to be facing. Now is not the time to be struggling with debt repayments and with cash shortages. So building the strengths, seeing through the difficult times, but at the same time, making the incremental changes that you need to make. Don't do anything radical right now. The organization is already under significant strain, but certainly, as one client was saying to me just yesterday, we've got so much going on, we're running out of managerial bandwidth. We don't want to drop the ball. So absolutely, don't embark on major initiatives, strategic initiatives at this point in time. Drive the incremental improvements, optimize, enhance, get things working, make things reliable, because that's the simplicity you need to survive the next 12 months.
Yeah, no, makes perfect sense, right? Make it simple, make it flexible, make it predictable, and make sure you have a cushion ready, because you never know when you might need it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Well, it's been wonderful chatting with you, Farhan. Thank you again for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for your time. Thanks.